We believe Ripple is the IMF disguised as a private company. This is probably part 4, maybe 5 of a series. We're gonna keep talking about it. Consider smash that like, and also make sure you follow Jesse over Apex Crypto Consulting NFA, because honestly, if you're not doing that, no offense, you are not truly following what matters for XRP. Call to action. Give him a follow over on his channel. You want the cheat code? Apex Crypto Consulting or Apex Jesse. It actually comes right up if you just type Apex Jesse. Anyway, we're gonna jump right into this. Let's share what we're talking about. This has been shared before with the community, but we're gonna get into a lot of key things. And Jesse will interrupt me a few times. I welcome his interruption. It's gonna help with the flow because we're gonna read some documentation. So this is gonna be a solid video. We encourage you to stick around to the end. Again, to the end of this outline. You're not gonna want to miss a single thing.
After these messages, we'll be right back. Yeah.
How would you like to earn an extra $100, $200, or even $500 a day, even more than that? I have many friends that are earning money every single day trading futures on BTCC. It's a simple process, and even if you don't want to learn how to trade, you could follow a trader on the site and let him do the trading for you. Currently, I am following BlackRock. And no, it's not the Larry Fink BlackRock, that's just his name, but this gentleman has a win rate of 95.33%. His assets under management is a little over 96,000, so he has a lot to lose. Don't just follow the people that have very little to lose. Follow the ones that actually are consistently trading. This is currently full at the moment at 1,200 copy traders. So if you see this basically have an open slot, again, not financial advice, you may want to consider jumping into that. Here's why. As you also see, the last 7 days, his win rate is 100%. The last month, his win rate is 95.51%. And the last 3 months, he's doing about roughly 89%. Again, a lot of you guys want just a copy trader that you can basically follow, but again, don't set it and forget it. Learn copy trading. And again, I'm not trying to have any of you guys use your hard-earned money to lose anything. You don't know what you're doing, don't jump into this, but there is money to be made, and don't use your nest egg for leverage trading. Use a separate portfolio. But I suggest learn how to trade. Earn you some extra money on BTCC. It's easy. You don't have to KYC, and you don't have to use a virtual private network VPN. This is a wonderful site. They've been around since 2011. Give them a shot. Also, when you earn that extra money, you can store that on your Decent wallet. The Decent wallet was not affected by the recent XRPL debacle, where the backdoor of many wallets was open and there was a breach. So Decent wallet was not affected by that. Decent wallet is as safe as you keep your seed phrase. It's a wonderful product, and you can get the discount by using the link. It's the only way to get the affiliate discount, and that is to use an affiliate link. So that link is popping up on the upper right side of your screen, and it is the one that you will use. You will also get free shipping. Pick you up a Decent wallet today. Secure your assets. If you don't have them stored in a wallet and sitting on an exchange, then you're at risk. So pick you one up today. Thank you. For one, let's give a shout out to ProfessoRipplEffect. Give him a follow. He has great content. It's up there actually with smoke. I'm not even kidding you guys. So we're going to zoom in a little bit more. You guys saw a little taste of that in the intro. Let's watch the whole thing, and then we'll have some analysis. Here we go.
Try.
Do you see IMF holding crypto assets in the future? Oh, they're over here. That's easier. You want to take one? Go for it. The first one's for you. IMF. Do you see IMF holding crypto assets in the future? I did not put that up there.
Remember, I'm from the legal department. I'm supposed to be very conservative about these things. I don't want to go into great details about
Maybe I should take what the IMF is going to do. I think we stunned Ross into silence with that one.
For that to happen, okay, under the current legal framework, some country would have to use a crypto asset as its currency. Try.
Do you see?
All right, Jesse, let's talk about use a crypto asset as its currency. And oh crap, and the whole constant reference to IMF. So I realize for the large amount of XRP Army community, you may feel as though this is a little old. There's a whole new wave of people who have never seen this, and there's quite a few people that are hardcore XRP people who have maybe never seen this. So again, that crypto asset. Before we continue with the documents.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't realize how powerful the IMF is in the first place. So even if there's a lot of people in Ripple that have maybe seen or heard some connections to the IMF, most people don't even realize how powerful they are. So it doesn't hurt to to explain it, right? It's the most powerful, one of the most powerful institutions in the world, aside from the BIS, which is the Bank for International Settlements, which is a central bank for all central banks. The IMF is a lender of last resort. They bail out countries. I won't go into details on what kind of things that those countries have to deal with after getting these big loans from the IMF. It ain't pretty in general. I won't go in detail like that because I do like my channel. I would like to keep it. So we'll see. But yeah, like what blows me away with this video here is like Brad Garlinghouse is literally like talking to him like he's talking to his brother, right? Like here you have, this is one of the top guys at the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and he's talking to him as if he's talking to his brother, sister, cousin. Like he's like almost like, oh, he's talking to him like he's a joke. Like he's not shy at all to talk to this person, which is one of the most powerful, one of the top guys at the IMF, right? And he says, maybe I should tell him what the IMF is going to do. I mean, okay, right. That's what I've been saying. The connection between Ripple and the IMF. It's not a joke for him to be talking to the IMF like that, like it's nothing, and telling him what they're gonna do and what they're not gonna do. Listen, my friends, like I keep saying this. Ripple is not your average company. Ripple would not be able to do 1% of what it's doing unless this was planned at the very, 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 very top. A company cannot position itself to be the next global reserve currency or the next global liquidity layer, replace the US dollar, and nobody stops them, and it can't be a normal company and do that. Like, no, like every executive, every people on the board of directors and advisory board at on Ripple would have been wiped out within 24 hours if this was not all planned years ago. Like, come on, like you're talking about replacing the US dollar as a global reserve currency, and not only is nobody going against them, they're actually all coordinating and helping and cooperating. And so, I mean, like I said, like Ripple is technically the elites. It's the big people, that the highest at the top. This guy's is a private company. Ripple would not be able to do what it's doing, not even 1%, if this is not all planned. And if people have done the research, know what I'm talking about. You don't even have to do research on XRP Ripple. Just doing research on the history of money, the history of what has happened to certain countries when they tried to get off the US dollar or tried to go against the current system. You can't even do 2%, not even 1% of what Ripple is doing. I mean, we could go on and on about, again, like I'm a bit careful what I say about that, what I explain, but look at what happened to Gaddafi. He wanted to create a new dollar for a new currency for the African countries, the continent of Africa. He was going to back it by gold, so he's going against the system. Saddam Hussein, it seems that he wanted to privatize, or he wanted to kick out the private corporations for the oil, where the oil profits of his country would benefit more his people instead of going to all these international corporations. We see what happened to him. I would encourage everybody to listen to a guy by the name of, I can't remember his name, sorry, but if you Google search Confessions of an Economic Hitman, I can't remember his name. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Listen to that guy for a few hours. And I'm telling you, make sure you're sitting down when you listen to him, or you can listen to Kevin Ship, a former 3-letter agency whistleblower. Used to work for the most powerful 3-letter agency in the world. He worked all the top positions for this 3-letter agency, and his name is Kevin Ship with 2 P's, so it's SHIPP. Listen to that guy, and listen to, like I said, Google search Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I think it's John Perkins. Listen to those 2 people. You'll get an understanding of just how powerful the IMF is. You'll get a, like I said, make sure you're sitting down when you listen to these 2 guys, if you choose to listen to them.
Yes, you are right. It is technically John Perkins. And here's the book if you guys are interested in that.
You can listen to a video. You can just listen. He has plenty of videos. Actually, you can just listen to him on YouTube. If you don't feel like reading a book, just listen to his speaking engagements where he talks about his history, his confessions of working as an economic hitman for the last 30 years. And
All right.
yeah, anyways, you'll see how powerful the IMF is.
I guess this guy enjoys a little plug to promoting his book. Anyway, I'm kidding. We're going to jump back to what we have and why it matters. So we're going to pull this up on your screen. Again, big shout out with thanks to our brother in the space, or brother in Christ as well. ProfessoRipplEffect on X. Again, this area is where Jesse's going to inject. What I mean by that is he'll interrupt me a few times. I welcome the interruption because it helps with the flow. So he points out full XRPL and cross-border payments evidence of acknowledgement in IMF publications and engagements, not financial advice. And again, IMF as an international monetary fund. In this abstract, you're going to see some things here. So for one, it says the IMF has consistently highlighted inefficiencies in cross-border payments and remittances, focusing on high costs, delays, and fragmented infrastructures. Ripple and the XRPL, or XRP Ledger as an XRPL, have positioned themselves as private sector solutions to these challenges, promoting interoperability, instant settlement, and ISO 20022 compliance. This paper basically is a primer for primary IMF and Ripple documents to assess where Ripple, XRP, and of course the XRP Ledger have been acknowledged within those IMF work streams. And then there's 5 key forms, we're going to talk about that for a second, of acknowledgement that are identified. Number 1, advisory involvement through Ripple's executive chair, Chris Larson, joined the IMF's high-level advisory group of finance and technology. Number 2, direct engagement with Ripple, representing an IMF seminar on cross-border payments in the Pacific. And if anything, I mean, think about the terminology here. This part, direct engagement. So the IMF, all right? And then number 3, explicit citation where the IMF documents Palau's sovereign stablecoin project in partnership with Ripple. We've already been through that, I think, dating back to 2023, 2024, especially 2024. Number 4, public recognition where then, at the time, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde, because she's no longer the big head honcho there, she's actually European Central Bank, ECB, but at the time she was part of IMF, cited Ripple as a disruptor, again, disruptor at the Paris FinTech Forum in January 2019. And then number 5, visual evidence of Ripple's leadership directly participating in IMF high-level advisory group and policy roundtables between 2018 to 2019, seated alongside Lagarde, as in Christine Lagarde, and senior central bank officials. While the IMF has not endorsed Ripple as an official cross-border settlement infrastructure, its publications, forums, and convened panels demonstrate recognition of Ripple's relevance in discussions on remittances, digital money, cross-border payment reform. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause on that, kick over to Jesse. We have a lot more about this, and he has so many citations, master's level citations that we're going to reference here as well. So again, Jesse, I want to get you some of your 2 cents on this before we get further down into this, because it's a lot to get into, and we should highlight some of this.
Yeah, I could go on forever about that. So ISO 20022, Ripple was created in, technically the beginnings of Ripple were around 2004. I mean, aside from David Short's literally holding the distributed ledger patent in 1989, okay, Ripple technically kind of started in 2004, which is it's the same year as the ISO 20022 was created as well. They both created at the same time, because even though you have the technology to instantly settle with Ripple, the messaging standard, the messaging format for the payments globally needs to be standardized as well. Otherwise, Ripple will not be successful. So I just want you to know that Ripple and the ISO 20022 were literally created the same year. When we look at Palau, a lot of people don't know this. I showed this in one of my videos, but in the IMF document, when it's referencing the Palau stablecoin, IMF actually, this is an IMF document, they actually slipped and they said that Palau is using the Ripple R3 blockchain. Isn't that interesting? And remember, Gilbert Verdian said we also partnered with R3, who's bringing the shared ledger where all tokenized assets reside. So R3 Corda uses the Corda settler that uses the XRP ledger for settlement for instant liquidity. Okay. XDC is a bit different. XDC is more for cross-border tokenization. For tokenization of everything that involves global trade. So it's not necessarily, it's not a bridge asset. It's a bit different. I did a big deep dive on that to clear the confusion for everyone. But just, I just wanted to point that out. When talking about Palau, IMF said that they're using the Ripple R3 blockchain. Isn't that interesting? Why? Because again, R3 Corda uses the R3 Corda settler for settlement, which uses XRP. Might as well call it the XRP settler. So in 1988, this is how close the relationship between Ripple and IMF is. Okay, in 1988, we see the Economist magazine coming out where it says, "Get ready for a new world reserve currency." And a lot of people talk about the article where you have the rising phoenix, and you see this currency rising from the ashes, and you see the fiat currency system burning. But a lot of people, like very few people, ever talk about the article itself. Like, what did the article in the Economist magazine talk about? And it talked about how they had some new. This is 1988, guys. Okay, this is 30 years ago, 37 years ago, 38 years ago, almost to be exact. 37, sorry. It said that the article said that there was new technologies that existed now in 1988 that was going to allow them to create technically like a new system, a new global reserve currency, and this currency would replace many of the currencies, and it would literally help with global trade, technically cross-border remittances. So with global trade, liquidity, and help to fix the issues with the FX market, which is exactly what Ripple does to the T. Okay, so when you take that article, you plug it in AI, and you say, what does this article say, and how does this resemble Ripple? It resembles Ripple like to the T. And so this is 1988. Then David Schwartz, which is the chief cryptographer for Ripple at the time in 1989, the year before, he gets awarded a patent for distributed computer systems. And you can Google it right now, search David Schwartz Bitcoin patent. It'll show up there. It's technically a Bitcoin patent. And he's awarded that in 1989. But if you look at the patent, he actually filed it in 1988, the exact year that the Economist magazine wrote about this new technology and this new global reserve currency. And they said that this new global reserve currency would be would happen in like within 30 years, which would be 2018, technically, 30 years from the article. 2018 is when we see RippleNet starting to gain adoption. And then we see articles coming from, we see PDFs and reports coming from the Hyperledger Foundation showing the Internet of Value. And you see that by 2018 to 2025, all the banks are holding XRP, and XRP becomes the global RTGS. So all the central banks around the world, they have RTGS systems, which are called real-time gross settlement systems. These are the settlement systems for the nations. But Ripple in that document is shown to be the global RTGS. So it's the settlement for cross-border. It's the global RTGS. It's a RTGS for all of the central banks. So it's kind of the central banks for all central banks. And in the article, in this PDF coming from the Hyperledger Foundation, it also talks about how Ripple becomes the global RTGS and the global liquidity marketplace. The XRP ledger becomes Actually, it didn't say Ripple, sorry. It said XRP Ledger, to be exact. It was XRP Ledger becomes a global RTGS, and it becomes the global liquidity marketplace because of the Interledger Protocol and XRP Ledger. So, again, this is going back 1989, 1988, same article, same year the technology was developed or technically patented. David Schwartz, same year patents, technically the Bitcoin patent or distributed ledger technology. And then... so now he's working with Ripple. Like what a coincidence. And then you have Ripple created the same year, like I said, ISO 20022. It's every pain point that the central bankers and the IMF have been talking about for 15, 20 years. XRP Ripple addresses all those pain points to the T. So like that's why when Ripple started and they're saying, oh, we're gonna do cross-border payments and we're gonna work with the system, we're gonna do cross-border, they're making it sound like it's small, right? Like, oh, we're gonna address this pain point and we're gonna do cross-border. It's not about only cross-border, my friend. It's about fixing the liquidity crisis. It's about fixing the Triffin's dilemma. It's about that vision of the Bancor going way back to the Bretton Woods Agreement. Because when the Bretton Woods Agreement was created, there was two in 1945, which is the same day the IMF created. There was two after World War II, I believe. There was two propositions. There was either we go with the US dollar being backed by gold, or we go with the Bancor, because the IMF was proposing the Bancor, which would be a neutral bridge currency that the IMF would control. And at the time, the world decided to go with the US dollar, and they were going to back it by gold. So the US dollar would be the main global reserve currency. Everybody would do their global trade with the US dollar. And basically, the US agreed to hold gold in reserves for every US dollar that they issued. At the time, there was an economist by the name of, his last name was Triffins, and he, I think it's Triffins, or I'm pretty sure it's Triffins. And he said, like, this is okay for now because America is very prosperous and powerful, but in the future, it's going to be problematic because the US will eventually have to run deficits to be able to supply the US dollar for all the other countries to be able to do global trade. Like, they're going to have to run deficits, and this is going to be a problem. And that's what's called the Triffins dilemma. And so, but the other thing that was proposed at the time was the Bancor, which again would be a neutral bridge currency. It's not tied to any government that way, because it's not tied to a sovereign currency and it's not tied to any national body like to a country. The Bancor would have been more neutral, and every country would be allowed to do what they want to do, and it didn't affect any other country. So the U.S., how would I explain that? So basically, when we have a sovereign currency that acts as a global reserve currency, like what they did at the Bretton Woods originally in 1945, what happens is when that country, in that case the US, when they do certain monetary policy, because they're the global reserve currency, it affects all the other countries, sometimes in a negative way. For example, so anyway, it's called the Triffin's dilemma. It'll take a lot of time to explain that. Not only is Triffin's dilemma, but there's the other problem with having a global reserve currency that's tied to a sovereign currency. But anyway, it's called, one of the issues was the Triffin's dilemma. That's what they're trying to fix, right? So in 1968, the IMF proposed the SDR. They created the SDR, which is technically identical to what they had proposed with the Bancor. 1968, they created the SDR. Never got global adoption because they never got that liquidity and use cases, because at the time they only distributed it to the banks. I think it was either the major banks or so on, but they never gave it to everybody. They never gave it to all the tech companies and corporations and all the different banks and the developers to build use cases around it. Like, they never gave it to everybody. They just gave it to banks, and it seems like the way they structured it, it was flawed. It never got global adoption because it never got all those use cases, and it never got the liquidity that it needed in order to become the global reserve currency and act as a bridge currency, because it needs to be super, super, super liquid to serve its purpose, right? It can't go up and down like crazy. It needs to have liquidity, which was the goal, but they didn't structure it properly. And this was in 1968. But then we see the article in 1988, 20 years after. I think they realized their mistake. And I did some research on that. I did a big deep dive on that. But they realized that it's not working. They didn't structure it properly. The article comes out in Economist magazine saying there's new technologies that will allow them to technically do what they were trying to do, what the Bancor was proposed to do, and then what the SDR, special drawing rights, was supposed to do. Now in 1988, we see the article saying we have technology to do this. And like I said, David Schwartz gets the patent the year after, and now we see exactly what's happening. So Ripple's main product is on-demand liquidity, and it fixes the Triffin's dilemma, it fixes the liquidity crisis, and it fixes the FX market issue with FX. It fixes every single thing that the central bankers have been worried about for the last 30 years. Because if you go back, all the World Economic Forum meetings they've had, all the economic summit meetings they've had going back way back to almost 2000, it's all about fixing this liquidity crisis. And Ripple does that perfectly. And like I said, you can't do that. Ripple cannot do what they're doing unless they're backed, unless it's planned. You can't become, imagine a private company becoming, literally holding the global reserve currency and literally providing liquidity for the world and becoming a lender of last resort, because Miguel Diaz slipped, and because he was asked by Thinking Crypto, I think it was, shout out Thinking Crypto. He said, somebody, Thinking Crypto asked him, he said, what do you guys see yourselves doing with the 50 billion escrow? And he says, I don't know, don't know if we'll ever really sell it all. Maybe we could become like a lender of last resort. He said, I know that would kind of be weird, for a private company to be a lender of last resort. Maybe we could, maybe we pass off what's in escrow to another institution and they become like a lender of last resort. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why he had to leave Ripple for that comment, because right there, he's saying everything. Okay. For Ripple to become a lender of last resort, come on, think about that. A lender of last resort means they're bailing out countries. When a country literally fails and they're going bankrupt, the IMF steps in and gives them these huge loans. It bails them out, and then they have to sign over all of their private resources. I mean, you don't even want to know what they have to sign, what they have to do to get those loans from the IMF. It's not pretty. Trust me, just look into it. And so for a private company to literally be bailing out countries, a lender of last resort, that's the last resort. Doesn't matter which country it is. You're going to be bailing them out, and you're going to owe a debt to that company, Ripple. Come on, guys. Come on, think about that. Think about that for 2 seconds. That is not possible. Talk about a monopoly. You want to talk about a monopoly? Oh my goodness, the Rockefellers were. Anyways, I mean, come on, just think for a minute. Just think what that means. You think a private company could even say that and not vanish from the face of the earth and continue to get the support that they're getting from all the central banks around the world if this was not all planned? Oh, it makes me nervous to talk about this stuff, Dave, sometimes, but I have to.
Something I want to point out is a different source, because Jesse brought up the whole thing, specifically the IMF and, or I should say Ripple, a lender of last resort. I want to point out something to you guys. You may never seen this before. This is kind of something that we're doing kind of on the fly. I want you guys to see this for yourself. This comes from chathamhouse.org, dates back to 2018. It says the IMF remains the lender of last resort, literally. And as I blow this up a little bit more, I want you guys to see some things here. So it says the stigma attached to seeking help from the International Monetary Fund means countries try to avoid it wherever possible, but there are still no better options for struggling emerging markets. Okay. And then as I take it further down, let's take it back to 2008, because you got to keep in mind the Bitcoin white paper came out in 2008. And, again, why that white paper come out? Well, it came out because it was a disruptor of the traditional system, right? And it's like, it was tried and tested, and, some people feel as though it was like that was the blueprint for where we're at now. And again, the last housing crisis, the recession during that time, but where the case be, when central bank interest rates plummeted to combat the financial crisis, low interest yields in advanced economies caused many emerging markets to experience massive capital inflows, causing appreciating currencies. Now, at least at that time, as rates are beginning to rise again, especially at the U.S. Federal Reserve, the reserve is likely as the dollar value rises. Capital should begin to flow out of these emerging markets and put downward pressure on the currencies. I'm actually going to go down to this part. Recourse to the IMF is almost always a last resort. Interesting. And you're more than welcome to read this whole thing. So my thing is, what Jesse just mentioned makes a lot of sense here, because again, Ripple, the topic of lender of last resort, but literally, again, point out what we just mentioned, the IMF remains the lender of last resort, literally. So,
Well, but when countries have issues, what they're facing is a liquidity crisis, like global debt, a debt crisis, and liquidity crisis. And what is Ripple? On-demand liquidity. And Miguel Villa is admitting that literally they could maybe become the last resort, or pass their escrow to somebody else, another institution, and they would become a lender of last resort. And then we see all the ties with Ripple, with IMF, and I mean, come on, guys, it's Ripple's the IMF disguised as a private company. Now, the IMF did admit that their special drawing rights would kind of have to take on another form, maybe take on, like, they would have to make kind of different policies as how they had structured it originally. So I'm not sure how, like, who would get them all and so on, how it would be structured, but the IMF did admit and slip that they have to look at different ways of structuring the special drawing rights now and so on. So technically, so I'm not saying it's going to look identical as the original SDR in its distribution or whatever. I'm just saying it might be a bit different, obviously, but Ripple is it's not an ordinary company, let me tell you. And it's that the escrow is not for them. So I don't know if a bunch of countries gets a percentage and then the IMF gets the rest. I don't know what's the deal there between the central bankers and the IMF, especially with the Federal Reserve and stuff. But yeah, it's always liquidity crisis, and Ripple's main product is on-demand liquidity. On demand. You need liquidity? We got it. We got you. But you're going to pay for it. Trust you me. If it's the IMF behind it, you're going to pay for it. And in that article you just showed, they're being quite polite too. They're saying there's kind of a stigma, uncomfortable. They're not saying in great detail why people don't want to borrow from the IMF. But like I said, if you listen to the people that I told you beginning, Confessions of an Economy Hitman, John Perkins, you'll know why they don't want to borrow from the IMF. Oh my goodness, you can't even imagine. You cannot even imagine.
I was going to say, listen, everybody, to respect your time and not make this like, 45 minutes, an hour, and so on. We're going to cut this off right here. Please tune in for part 2. It's more deeper into everything that we were originally going to present at the beginning. But I love Jesse sharing some of his perspectives. So do us a solid. If you listen to the entire outline, type in this key 4 letters, which is, you could type it out long if you want to, but it's lender of last resort. So you figure out how to abbreviate that. We'll know.
Last resort. Last resort.
Last resort's fine. Okay, last resort. So, but again, we want you guys to understand why in our thumbnails we put some of these crazy prices and stuff like that. Because you think about it, again, Google, if they would have had the technology back in the 90s to tokenize the entire internet, well, geez, look where Google's at currently speaking, internet and information. If you can just wrap your mind around the whole topic of, like, again, like what Jesse was talking about, I've talked about too, Smoke, whoever, tokenizing the entire internet. So many people are going to lead you down this road of, well, not enough coins, not enough money in the world. This is not going to happen. Right. Think about it. Just real quick closing. Even cash money. How many times does cash money transfer so many hands? There's a story behind that. Only God knows that story technically behind that. Now you go from that to tokenization. I'm telling you flat out, a lot of people are still sleeping on these assets with real world use case. And we'll leave it there. Tune in tomorrow for some more of our deep dives and why they matter. We're going to get really, really deep into it also. We really do appreciate you all. May the Lord Jesus bless you all. I really, truly mean that. And with that said, we'll see you guys on the next one.
See you guys. Thank you.